Kyle Rogers, at 28, was living the dream in New York City. Raised by his doting grandparents, he never had to worry about money. They took care of everything, from his rent to his whims. Kyle worked sporadically as a waiter at an upscale restaurant in Manhattan, not because he needed to, but to pass the time. The lavish lifestyle of the city was his playground, with no real effort required on his part. Life was a smooth sail, devoid of significant challenges or worries. One evening, as Kyle was serving tables, he couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversations from the wealthy patrons. Their tales of luxury holidays, expensive hobbies, and elite social circles fascinated him. Someday, he thought, I'll be the one living that life, not just observing it. He'd often find himself daydreaming about a future where he wasn't just a waiter but a man of immense wealth and power, commanding respect and attention. Despite his seemingly perfect life, there was an underlying restlessness within Kyle. He felt a constant yearning for more luxury, more status, more of everything he saw in the lives of the restaurant's patrons. Why should they have it all? He often mused. This desire for a grander life grew with each passing day, pushing him to consider ways to climb the social ladder. The comfort of his current life was no longer enough. He needed a way to break free from its golden cage. His friends often noticed his preoccupation with wealth and status. "Kyle, you've got it good, man. Why the obsession?" one of his colleagues asked one day. Kyle shrugged, smiling. "I just want to know what it feels like to live without limits, you know? To have the world at your feet." His friend chuckled, shaking his head. "Just don't lose yourself chasing that dream." Kyle laughed it off, but the words lingered in his mind. As he lay in bed at night, Kyle's mind buzzed with possibilities, his dreams filled with visions of grandeur and the high life he so desperately craved. Despite the comforts and luxuries of his current life, Kyle Rogers couldn't shake off a growing sense of dissatisfaction. His job at the upscale restaurant, once a mere pastime, began to feel like a constant reminder of the wealth and status he lacked. Each night, as he served the city's elite, his longing for more intensified. "This can't be all there is," he thought to himself, watching the wealthy patrons with envy. He craved their lifestyle, their ease, and most of all, their freedom from financial worries. Kyle's grandparents noticed his restless demeanor. One evening, his grandmother gently asked, "Kyle, is everything all right? You seem distant lately." Kyle forced a smile. "I'm fine, Nana. Just thinking about the future," he replied, though he knew deep down that fine was far from the truth. His grandparents had always provided for him, and he didn't want to burden them with his growing ambitions. Yet, the desire for more was becoming a constant, gnawing presence in his life. The more Kyle worked at the restaurant, the more he felt the need to escape his current situation. Serving the wealthy patrons, he saw firsthand the ease with which they navigated their lives, making him yearn for the same. How do they do it? He often wondered. How do they achieve such success? His colleagues, noticing his frequent daydreaming, would often tease him. "Earth to Kyle, you're zoning out again," one would joke. But Kyle's thoughts were far from the restaurant. They were fixated on a future where he was no longer a mere observer but a participant in the world of wealth. One night, after closing the restaurant, Kyle confided in a close friend and co-worker, James. "I need to find a way out of this, James. I can't keep living like this, always on the outside looking in," he confessed. James nodded sympathetically. "I get it, man. But be careful. Chasing wealth can be a dangerous game. Just don't lose sight of who you are," he advised. Kyle appreciated the concern but felt a surge of determination. "I won't," he promised, though he wasn't entirely sure how he would achieve his dreams. The need for a better life had become an all-consuming drive, and Kyle was willing to do whatever it took to turn his dreams into reality. One particularly busy night at the restaurant, Kyle found himself juggling multiple tables, each filled with the city's elite. Amidst the clinking of glasses and murmur of conversations, a distinct voice caught his attention. "Excuse me, young man," a refined woman called out. Kyle turned to find an elegant lady in her late 70s, her demeanor exuding confidence and sophistication. Her silver hair was styled perfectly, and she wore a designer dress that spoke of old money and taste. Could you bring us a bottle of your finest champagne? She asked with a warm smile. Kyle nodded, intrigued by her aura. Throughout the evening, Kyle couldn't help but notice the woman's commanding presence. She was the center of attention at her table, effortlessly engaging everyone in conversation. As the night wore on, Kyle found himself serving her table more frequently, drawn to her magnetism. During one of his visits to the table, she looked up at him and said, "You have a certain charm about you. What's your name?" Kyle, taken aback by her directness, responded, "I'm Kyle, ma'am." "Kyle Rogers." She extended her hand. "Pleasure to meet you, Kyle. I'm Margaret Thompson." Their brief interactions left a lasting impression on Kyle. After serving her table one last time, Margaret handed him her business card. "Give me a call tomorrow, Kyle. I might have an interesting opportunity for you," she said with a knowing smile. Kyle's heart raced as he pocketed the card. This felt like a pivotal moment, a potential turning point in his life. He spent the rest of his shift in a daze, thoughts racing about what kind of opportunity Margaret could be offering. The next morning, Kyle woke up with a sense of purpose. He dialed Margaret's number, his fingers trembling slightly. "Good morning, Miss Thompson. This is Kyle Rogers, from the restaurant last night," he began, trying to keep his voice steady. Margaret's voice on the other end was calm and welcoming. "Ah, Kyle, I was hoping you'd call. How about you come by my residence this afternoon? I'd like to discuss something with you in person," she said. Kyle agreed, his curiosity piqued and his excitement barely contained. That afternoon, Kyle arrived at Margaret's opulent townhouse, its grandeur unlike anything he had ever seen. He was greeted by a butler who led him to a spacious, tastefully decorated living room. Margaret sat by the fireplace, sipping tea. "Kyle, please, have a seat," she invited, gesturing to a plush armchair. As he sat down, Margaret began to explain. "I've been looking for a reliable and trustworthy individual to assist me with various tasks, primarily as my personal driver. My current driver is retiring in a few days, and your demeanor and charm last night convinced me that you might be the right fit," she said, her eyes studying him intently. Kyle listened intently, feeling a mix of excitement and disbelief. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for. "I would be honored to work for you, Miss Thompson," he replied, trying to keep his composure. Margaret smiled warmly. "Excellent. You can start tomorrow. I'll have my butler provide you with all the necessary details," she said. As Kyle left her residence, he felt a surge of optimism. This new role could be the gateway to the life he had always dreamed of. Little did he know, this encounter would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. As Kyle settled into his new role as Margaret's driver, he found himself spending more and more time with her. Their daily drives around the city provided ample opportunities for conversation. Margaret enjoyed reminiscing about her past adventures and discussing her philanthropic endeavors, while Kyle listened intently, absorbing every detail. He quickly realized that Margaret's fortune extended far beyond what he had initially imagined. The grand estates, the exclusive parties, and the influential circles she moved in were a glimpse into the world he so desperately wanted to be part of. One afternoon, while driving Margaret to a charity gala, she turned to him and said, "Kyle, you have been an absolute delight to have around. I can't remember the last time I enjoyed someone's company this much." Kyle smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. "Thank you, Miss Thompson. It's truly an honor to work for you," he replied. Margaret continued, "I've been thinking. I could use someone like you in more ways than just a driver. How would you feel about assisting me with some of my other affairs?" Kyle's heart skipped a beat. This was exactly the opportunity he had been waiting for. As weeks turned into months, Kyle's responsibilities grew. He began managing some of Margaret's social engagements and even helped coordinate her charity events. Their bond strengthened, and with it, Kyle's ambitions. He saw an opening to weave himself deeper into Margaret's life and secure the wealth he craved. One evening, over a quiet dinner, Margaret shared a personal story about her late husband. Kyle seized the moment to express his admiration. "You deserve all the happiness in the world, Margaret. I hope I can help make your life easier and more joyful," he said, his voice sincere. Margaret's eyes softened. "You're very kind, Kyle. I'm grateful for your support," she said, patting his hand. Kyle felt a rush of confidence. He knew he was making progress. He started to subtly flirt with Margaret, testing the waters. You know, Margaret, I've always admired your elegance and strength. It's rare to find someone as inspiring as you, he remarked one day. Margaret blushed slightly. Oh, Kyle, you're too sweet, she responded, clearly flattered. Encouraged by her reaction, Kyle continued to charm Margaret, his intentions becoming clearer. He planned elaborate dates, showered her with compliments, and ensured she felt special every day. Margaret, charmed by his attentiveness and youthful energy, found herself growing fond of him. They began spending more time together outside of their usual routines. Walks in Central Park, private dinners at exclusive restaurants, and evenings at the opera became regular occurrences. One evening, while strolling along the waterfront, Margaret paused to take in the view of the city lights reflecting on the water. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she said, leaning into Kyle. He wrapped an arm around her, feeling the warmth of her presence. "Not as beautiful as you," he replied softly. Margaret smiled, her heart fluttering at his words. Their relationship blossomed from that moment, transitioning from a professional bond to a romantic one. As their romance deepened, Kyle and Margaret became inseparable. They attended social events together, and Kyle's charm won over Margaret's friends and associates. On weekends, they would escape to Margaret's country estate, where they enjoyed quiet, intimate moments away from the city's hustle and bustle. Kyle made Margaret feel young and alive again, and she relished the attention and affection he showered upon her. Months into their relationship, Kyle decided it was time to take the next step. He planned an elaborate evening at one of New York's most exclusive restaurants, ensuring every detail was perfect. After a sumptuous meal, Kyle took Margaret's hand and led her to a secluded terrace adorned with fairy lights. As the city skyline provided a breathtaking backdrop, he got down on one knee. "Margaret, you have brought so much joy and love into my life. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" he asked, presenting a dazzling ring. Margaret, overwhelmed with emotion, felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Oh, Kyle, yes. Yes, I will," she exclaimed, her voice trembling with happiness. Kyle slipped the ring onto her finger, sealing their engagement with a kiss. As they embraced, Kyle couldn't help but feel a surge of triumph. He had secured Margaret's trust and love, and now, as her fiancé, he was one step closer to the life of luxury and wealth he had always dreamed of. Little did he know, the consequences of his actions were already set in motion. With their engagement now public, Kyle and Margaret's life seemed like a fairy tale. They attended lavish parties, dined at the finest restaurants, and traveled to exotic locations. Kyle, reveling in his newfound status, indulged in the luxuries he had always dreamed of. He bought designer clothes, expensive watches, and placed large bets, all funded by Margaret's fortune. Life seemed perfect, but beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form. Margaret's financial advisor, Mr. Higgins, started noticing unusual spending patterns. Concerned, he approached Margaret during one of their regular meetings. "Margaret, I've noticed some significant expenses on your accounts recently. I think we should review them together," he suggested, handing her a detailed report. Margaret, initially dismissive, replied, "I'm sure it's nothing, Higgins. Kyle has been making some investments for us. He's very good with these things." However, as the spending continued to escalate, Margaret couldn't ignore the red flags. She decided to investigate further. One afternoon, while Kyle was out, she accessed the bank statements and credit card bills. Her heart sank as she saw the extravagant purchases and significant withdrawals. Designer clothes, high-end electronics, and large cash transfers to unfamiliar accounts. It was all there, in black and white. Margaret's trust in Kyle began to waver. Determined to get some clarity without jumping to conclusions, Margaret decided to speak with Kyle directly. One evening, she invited him to dinner at home. As they sat in the dimly lit dining room, she brought up the topic gently. "Kyle, I've been looking over our finances lately," she began, her tone measured. "There are a few expenses I don't quite understand. Could you explain them to me?" Kyle looked up, a hint of surprise in his eyes. "Oh, those," he said, trying to sound nonchalant. "I've been making some investments and buying a few things for us. It's all under control." Margaret nodded, her expression unreadable. I see, she said, not pressing further but making a mental note to dig deeper. She didn't want to accuse Kyle without more evidence, but the seeds of doubt had been planted. Just make sure to keep me informed about these things in the future, all right? She added, maintaining her calm demeanor. Kyle, relieved that the conversation hadn't escalated, agreed readily. Of course, Margaret. I'll make sure to keep you in the loop. As the evening went on, Margaret couldn't shake the uneasy feeling growing inside her. She watched Kyle closely, his every move now tinged with suspicion. While she maintained a composed exterior, her mind raced with thoughts of betrayal and deceit. The confrontation she had planned was postponed, but Margaret knew she couldn't ignore the issue for long. The truth, she believed, would eventually come to light, and when it did, she needed to be prepared. The following day, Margaret prepared a quiet dinner for the two of them. As they sat down to eat, she broached the subject of their finances again. Kyle, I've been thinking about our conversation the other night, she began, her voice steady. I want us to be more transparent with each other, especially when it comes to our finances. It's important for our future together. Kyle looked up from his plate, his expression neutral. Of course, Margaret. I'll make sure to keep you updated on everything, he replied smoothly. Margaret smiled, masking her inner turmoil. Good. It's just that I've noticed some rather large withdrawals and purchases recently. Are these part of your investments? She asked casually. Kyle nodded, a hint of defensiveness creeping into his voice. Yes, they're all part of my plan to secure our financial future. Trust me, Margaret. I know what I'm doing. She nodded slowly, absorbing his words while hiding her growing distrust. As they finished dinner, Margaret felt a renewed determination. She would gather all the evidence she needed before taking any action. She wanted to ensure that when she finally confronted Kyle, there would be no room for denial or manipulation. For now, she would continue to play the role of the trusting fiancé, but her resolve was firm. The truth would come out, and she would be ready to handle whatever followed. In the days following their conversation, Margaret maintained her facade of trust and warmth. She continued to monitor Kyle's activities discreetly, her resolve to protect her fortune and uncover the full extent of his deceit growing stronger. Kyle, seemingly oblivious to her suspicions, continued his extravagant spending and clandestine affair, confident in his ability to manipulate Margaret. One afternoon, as Kyle was out, Margaret met with her private investigator to review the latest findings. The evidence was overwhelming. Photos, financial records, and detailed accounts of Kyle's activities. Margaret's heart ached with betrayal, but she remained composed. She needed a meticulous plan to ensure Kyle faced the consequences of his actions without forewarning him. Margaret decided to start by discreetly securing her assets. She visited her lawyer and financial advisor, instructing them to make changes to her will and tighten control over her finances. I want to make sure my assets are protected and used for the purposes I intended, she explained, her voice firm. They agreed to implement her requests immediately, sensing the urgency in her tone. In the evenings, Margaret continued to engage with Kyle as if nothing had changed. They attended social events, dined at their favorite restaurants, and even planned a vacation. Kyle remained unaware of the storm brewing beneath Margaret's calm exterior. Her patience was tested daily, but she knew that timing was crucial. Any premature action could alert Kyle and jeopardize her plans. One night, after they returned from a gala, Margaret casually mentioned, Kyle, I've been thinking about revisiting my will and making sure everything is in order. It's just something that's been on my mind lately. Kyle, not sensing any threat, responded, That sounds like a good idea, Margaret. It's always wise to be prepared. She nodded, hiding her true intentions behind a serene smile. Just as her preparations were nearing completion, tragedy struck. One morning, Margaret failed to wake up. The house was filled with a sense of foreboding as the staff found her unresponsive in her bed. The doctor arrived and confirmed the worst. Margaret had passed away in her sleep, likely from a sudden heart attack. Kyle, upon hearing the news, was initially struck with genuine shock. But as the reality set in, his thoughts quickly turned to the implications of her death on his own future. Margaret's unexpected death sent shockwaves through Kyle's life. The household was plunged into mourning, and Kyle played the part of the grieving fiancé with convincing sorrow. As the days passed, preparations for Margaret's funeral were made, and the grand event was attended by many of New York's elite, all paying their respects to the beloved philanthropist. A week after the funeral, Kyle was summoned to Margaret's lawyer's office for the reading of her will. He arrived with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety, unsure of what to expect. The lawyer, a stern-looking man with a calm demeanor, greeted him and motioned for him to sit. "Mr. Rogers, thank you for coming. As you know, we're here to go over Margaret's final wishes," he said, opening a thick file on his desk. Kyle listened intently as the lawyer read through the will. Margaret had left generous bequests to various charities and foundations, ensuring her legacy of philanthropy would continue. She also provided for her staff and made provisions for her grandchildren. Kyle's name had yet to be mentioned, and his impatience grew. Finally, the lawyer paused, looked at Kyle, and continued. "Margaret has also left specific instructions regarding Mr. Kyle Rogers," the lawyer said. Kyle leaned forward, his heart racing. "Mr. Rogers, Margaret valued your companionship and service. However, she has made it clear that her fortune will not be left to you." Kyle's face paled. "Instead, she has left you a key to a safe deposit box at her bank, with instructions to open it upon the reading of this will." Kyle's mind raced as he made his way to the bank. The idea of a hidden treasure reignited his hopes. Upon arrival, he was led to a private room where the safe deposit box awaited. With trembling hands, he unlocked it, only to find a single envelope inside. He tore it open, revealing a letter and a stack of photographs. As he read Margaret's words, his heart sank. "Dear Kyle," the letter began, "I trusted you and believed in you, but your actions revealed your true nature. The photographs enclosed show the depths of your betrayal. I hope this serves as a lesson in the consequences of greed and deceit. My fortune will go to those who truly deserve it. I leave you with nothing but the memories of what you could have had you been honest and true. With regret, Margaret." Staring at the incriminating photos of himself with his mistress, Kyle felt a wave of despair. Margaret had outmaneuvered him even in death, ensuring her wealth would be used for good and not squandered by his selfish ambitions. As he left the bank, he realized he was not only without the fortune he coveted, but also with his reputation and future in tatters. The bitter taste of his own actions was all he had left, a harsh reminder of the consequences of his deceit. Returning to the lavish apartment that had once felt like a symbol of his success, Kyle found it empty and devoid of the warmth Margaret had brought. The staff, who had once treated him with respect, now looked at him with a mixture of pity and disdain. Alone and shunned by the social circles he once craved, Kyle sold his expensive clothes and watches to pay off his mounting debts. He realized that his pursuit of wealth and status had cost him not only his dreams, but also his integrity. Determined to rebuild his life, Kyle took a job at a local community center, helping underprivileged youth. He found solace in giving back, using his experiences to guide others away from the mistakes he had made. Slowly, he began to earn the respect and trust of those around him, not through wealth or status, but through genuine acts of kindness and integrity. The bitterness of his past actions transformed into a driving force for positive change in his community. Years passed, and Kyle Rogers became known for his dedication to helping others. Margaret's legacy lived on, not just through her charitable donations, but through the lessons she had imparted on Kyle. He had learned that true wealth was not measured in money or possessions, but in the relationships we build and the impact we have on the lives of others. Kyle found a new purpose, one that brought him a sense of fulfillment and peace he had never known before. He would always carry the memory of Margaret and the lesson of his past, but it was this very lesson that had led him to a life of true value and meaning.